The NFL draft is over, but if you think the Patriots are done shaping this roster, think again, because what happened after the draft may actually be just as important as what happened during it. New England walked away with 9 draft picks, and there is a lot for Patriots fans to be excited about. The front office attacked multiple needs, adding edge help, offensive tackle depth, a tight end, a quarterback, linebacker help, and more developmental pieces late in the draft. There is genuine belief around this rookie class, especially after the Patriots made an aggressive move in the first round to go get Caleb Blamu, a move that told everyone this team was willing to be proactive rather than reactive. Add in names like Gabe Eyes, Eli Raridan, Karen Prunty, Demetrius Crownover, Nnamdi Obisor, Baron Morton, Jim Miller, and Quintavious Hutchkins, and you can see a roster being layered with young talent. But here's where this gets interesting for Patriots fans. Even after a draft class that addressed several areas, the front office clearly still has unfinished business. There are still holes, there are still questions, and maybe most importantly, there are still opportunities. Linebacker remains one of the biggest storylines no one is talking enough about. Yes, Nnamdi Obisor adds youth, but there is still a real argument for veteran help, and that brings attention to Bobby Okereke. This is a name that keeps standing out because the fit makes too much sense to ignore. A player coming off a season with 143 tackles and 6 pass breakups is not someone you casually overlook. For a defense trying to establish consistency and leadership, adding a proven veteran next to Robert Spillane and Christian Ellis could stabilize the middle of that defense in a big way. And then there is safety, maybe the most quietly urgent need on this roster. The Patriots did not draft a safety, and that surprised a lot of people, especially because many expected the team to address it by day 3 at the latest. Instead, they left the draft with Kevin Byard and Craig Woodson projected to lead the room, but behind them, that depth feels thin. That is why Donovan Wilson has become such an intriguing post-draft possibility. This may not be the flashy move that grabs national headlines, but Patriots fans know championships are often won because of moves exactly like this. Quiet veteran additions, smart depth signings, insurance policies that matter when injuries hit in November, not just headlines in May. And if safety is a concern, defensive tackle might be an even bigger mystery. How did the Patriots go through this draft without taking a defensive tackle? That question has not gone away. There was so much buzz before the draft about New England potentially targeting interior defensive line help early. It never happened, and now attention turns to whether the answer could come from free agency. Christian Wilkins suddenly feels like a fascinating name to watch. Think about this for a second. You already have Christian Barmore and Milton Williams anchoring the front, but adding Wilkins as a rotational force could make this unit dangerous. Not because he has to be the old version of himself every snap, but because even a healthy percentage of what he was could transform the rotation. 9 sacks and 10 tackles for loss in his last healthy season is not something you ignore. And here's where things start getting even more dramatic. The Patriots did not draft a wide receiver, not once. Round after round passed and New England never touched the position. And for a team that many expected to prioritize receiver help, that feels impossible to ignore, which naturally leads to one question fans are asking more and more. Does this mean something bigger is coming? There is growing belief inside the fan base that this could be tied to a possible pursuit of A.J. Brown, and whether that ultimately happens or not, the lack of a draft investment at receiver feels deliberate. It does not feel accidental. But if A.J. Brown does not happen, another storyline starts to emerge. Could a Stefon Diggs reunion actually be on the table? That possibility suddenly becomes hard to dismiss. Last season's production speaks for itself. 85 catches, 1,000 yards, minimal drops, reliable production. For a receiving room still looking for certainty, bringing in another proven target would be hard to argue against. Especially when you look at the current group and realize there's still room for one more major addition. And then there is one more layer to all of this. Cornerback depth, not because the top of the room is weak, far from it, but because behind Christian Gonzalez, Carlton Davis, and Marcus Jones, there are questions. Karen Prunty has promise, but he is still a rookie, and Patriots fans remember too well what happened when injuries tested the depth last season. That is why a veteran option like Rasul Douglas has surfaced in conversations. Not as a desperate move, but as a smart one, and this is what makes this offseason feel far from over. The draft may be complete, but the roster construction clearly is not. There is still linebacker help to consider, still safety depth to address. Still a defensive tackle question hanging out there. Still the massive mystery at wide receiver. And maybe, just maybe, one significant move still waiting to happen. Because when a team skips receiver in the draft entirely, leaves safety untouched, passes on defensive tackle, and still has cap flexibility, it starts to feel less like unfinished business and more like a plan still unfolding. And that is what makes the next few weeks so fascinating for Patriots fans. Are we about to see this front office make one more major move that changes how we look at this roster entirely? And if you're a Patriots fan, what do you think is the biggest move New England still has to make before this roster is truly ready? And that is where things could take a dramatic turn. Because if the Patriots really are keeping the door open for another major addition, the next stretch of this offseason may define how serious this team is about accelerating the rebuild. The draft added talent, but what happens after the draft may determine whether this roster is simply improved or legitimately dangerous. Let's go back to the wide receiver situation, because this may be the biggest clue that something bigger is brewing. Teams do not usually go through an entire draft without touching a position considered a major need unless they believe they have another answer. That is why the A.J. Brown speculation keeps growing louder. The absence of a drafted receiver does not feel random, it feels calculated. It feels like a front office that may be waiting for the right moment. And imagine what that would mean for this offense. You already have a roster that made serious investments in protection and offensive structure during the draft. Add a true number one weapon into that mix, and suddenly the conversation around this offense changes completely. Suddenly this is not about slow development anymore. This becomes about pushing forward now. But even if that move never materializes, the Patriots still have options, and that is where this gets fascinating. Because what makes this roster intriguing is not just the starters, it is how close a few smart veteran additions could push this team toward another level. Take the defense. Adding Bobby Okereke would not just be about linebacker depth, it would be about identity, toughness, reliability, leadership in the middle of the defense. The kind of move that does not dominate national headlines but matters every Sunday. Adding Donovan Wilson would not just be about filling a safety spot, it would be about preventing one injury from becoming a major problem. Adding Christian Wilkins would not just be adding a name, it could mean building one of the nastiest defensive fronts in football through rotation alone. And if a veteran corner like Rasul Douglas became part of the picture too, suddenly a defense that already has star power starts looking layered. That is how contenders are built, not just with splash moves, with layers. And what stands out right now is how many layers the Patriots may still be considering. There is also something else worth watching, and it is how much confidence this organization seems to have in this rookie class. That matters. Because when a team comes out of a draft believing it found foundational pieces, it changes how aggressive they may be afterward. You are not patching holes anymore. You are adding finishing touches. And Patriots fans should pay attention to that. Because rookie minicamp is coming. OTAs are coming. Training camp is coming. And every one of those checkpoints can reshape priorities. Maybe a rookie forces his way into a bigger role. Maybe a depth concern becomes even more obvious. Maybe one of these free agent possibilities suddenly becomes urgent. That is why this story feels unfinished. Because it is. And maybe that is the biggest takeaway from all of this. The Patriots did not leave the draft looking complete. They left looking active, like a team still working, like a team still hunting. And that is a dangerous thing for the rest of the AFC if the next move lands the way New England hopes. Because if one impact receiver arrives, if one veteran defensive piece is added, if one smart secondary move shores up the back end, then the conversation around this team may shift a lot faster than people expect. This may not be about a long rebuild at all. This may be about a roster trying to accelerate much sooner. And maybe that is why these post-draft moves matter so much. They may end up being the moves we look back on later and say that was when the Patriots really started putting it together. Now I want to hear from you, Patriots fans. If New England makes one more major move this offseason, what should it be? A wide receiver, a safety, and there is one more angle to this that Patriots fans should not overlook, because roster building rebuilding is not just about adding talent, it is about timing. And timing may be everything right now for New England. Because if the Patriots are waiting for June moves, if they are monitoring veterans still available, if they are positioning themselves for one more calculated strike, then what looks quiet on the surface may actually be one of the most important stretches of the offseason. And that is why the receiver storyline keeps pulling everything back into focus. Because the more you look at what happened in the draft, the harder it is to ignore what did not happen. No wide receiver selected, not one. That keeps raising the same question over and over again. And was that confidence or was that a signal? Because if it was a signal, then Patriots fans may be sitting here right now before one of the biggest moves of the offseason. And if that happens, everything changes. The offense looks different, expectations look different, even the pressure on the rookie class changes. One move can do that. And maybe that is why the post-draft conversation feels bigger than the draft itself. Because this does not feel like a finished roster. It feels like a roster on the edge of another move. And let's be honest, that has always been when New England has been at its most dangerous. When nobody sees the full picture yet. When moves are made quietly. When value is found after everyone thinks the major action is over. That has always been part of winning football. And you can feel some of that possibility right now. Especially when you start looking at how these pieces could connect. Imagine the defense with another proven linebacker presence. Imagine the secondary with another veteran stabilizer. Imagine the defensive front with one more disruptive rotational force. Then imagine adding another major weapon offensively. That does not feel like minor tweaking anymore. That starts sounding like a serious push. And that is why the next phase of this offseason may tell us more about Mike Vrabel's vision than the draft did, because the draft gave us prospects. The next moves may show philosophy. Are the Patriots building patiently, or are they preparing to compete faster than outsiders expect? That may be answered soon, and honestly, that may be why fans should be excited, because there is still mystery here. There is still upside here. There is still something unfinished about this whole story, and sometimes that is where the biggest developments happen. Not on draft night, after draft night, when veteran signings happen, when surprise moves emerge. When opportunities suddenly appear, and when front offices decide whether to stay conservative, but sure, or go make the move that changes everything. So keep watching this closely, because this offseason may have another major chapter left. And if it does, Patriots fans may look back at this moment as the calm before something much bigger. And what makes this even more compelling is that the closer you look at this roster, the more you realize the Patriots may be approaching a turning point. Not a small adjustment, a turning point. Because there's a difference between adding players and building momentum. And momentum may be what this team is chasing now. The draft brought youth, potential, competition. But the next move could bring something even more important, certainty. And that matters because there are still position groups where one proven veteran could completely change the outlook. Think about safety again. That may not be the flashy headline fans debate every day, but championships are often decided by the positions people talk about the least. One injury, one communication breakdown, one weak spot offenses can target, that can decide seasons. That is why the Donovan Wilson discussion has not gone away. It is not about star power, it is about securing a vulnerable area before it becomes a problem, and that same logic applies across the roster. The Christian Wilkins possibility remains fascinating because it is not just about replacing lost depth, it is about creating a front opponents hate dealing with, a rotation where fresh pass rushers